Hello friends, I recently started watching the TV show Crazyhead, and it is so disappointing. I thought I would just complain about it a little bit. I guess part of the problem is just that Buffy degrades with time. I started watching it when I was about 12, and it seemed really special and cool at the time, and I don't think it was just because of my age. I think it was partly that stuff about the show that has now become either cliched or just isn't impressive for its time anymore, was really creative and good when it came out. I partly feel that way about gender stuff. I feel like when I was a kid, the girl characters on Buffy seemed so different and just weirder and more interesting than girl characters on any other show. But now it's wow, there's so many aspects of the show that are kind of sexist and weird. The casting, but also just the way Xander is, I think, is one of the things that when you're watching the show from a modern grown-up perspective, it's kind of jacked up that he's always creeping on Buffy, and this is treated as totally normal. So anyway, I think I heard about Crazyhead because it was supposed to be the British Buffy, which it is. It's sort of exactly the same, but it's kind of weird because it was just made last year, but it felt like they didn't really update anything about it. The main character, Amy, has this guy friend who's in love with her, constantly telling her that he loves her and that he wants to have sex with her when she isn't interested. And it's I get how 10 or 20 years ago we would have accepted this as one of the main characters, but now it's what an asshole. The other thing about the show is the constant no homoing. So a lot of the main characters are girls and they have really close relationships. First of all, I think it would be better if they did get together. But second of all, for example, in the opening scene of the show, the main characters, Amy and Raquel, are trying to do an exorcism on Amy's best friend who is possessed. So Amy and her friend get very emotional and they start telling each other they love each other. And Raquel says, "Oh, are you gay or something?" At the time I laughed, but little did I know that this show would just be about girls acting like they're super gay, but the show either explicitly makes a point of saying that they're not gay or doesn't seem to acknowledge how gay it's coming across. Then meanwhile, there's all these dudes that are into Amy, Raquel's brother, who just comes into the room, falls in love with Amy, she falls in love with him, and then every so often they see each other and they're oh, I guess we should discuss the intense sexual tension that's building between us. They practically say that, and it's but they just barely met each other. I don't see any sexual tension, and I kind of feel like the show just suffers from from my perspective, I guess I didn't need to have my chair here in the frame. Yeah, from my perspective, it just suffers from having a huge disconnect between the way people act in the show and the way anyone would act in real life, even in a world with demons and stuff. I just don't think that would happen. And then yeah, that's my main complaint, I guess. The way that people don't act realistic. There's also just I don't want to say who wrote the show. I don't know that all the writers are men, and I don't want to be oh, men can't write realistic female characters or something, because I don't really think that's true. But there's just something about the show where it's but this isn't how a person would act. Is this how somebody thinks women act? At the end of the first episode, there's a scene where Amy needs to make a phone call, and she has a phone number written on her arm, and she's very distracted and upset, and she can't get her sleeves up to look at the number, so she takes off all of her clothes in public to make the phone call. And I don't know, I feel there's all these quirky scenes where I almost feel I can specifically see Buffy and other fantasy horror shows that I feel they're drawing a lot of inspiration from, and they want to have scenes that have that contrast everyday things and silly moments with drama and horror and fantasy, which I can appreciate. But I could just see it and I was wow, this is supposed to be an iconic moment where she has to take off all of her clothes to get this phone number, but it's just not working because a person wouldn't take all their clothes off in public in the rain at night. So it's just not really working. Then there's, been like multiple scenes where the villains are demons who are possessing people. So it's like, there's a demon and he's like, oh, I love eating huevos rancheros. Or there's a demon and she's like, oh, I'm like possessing a mom and I like love her son and like I'm a really good mom even though I'm an evil demon. Which, that was a little bit better than the huevos rancheros part. But it's just like, I don't know, it's just sort of like worn out its welcome, and it's not like, wow, I'm so amazed by the concept of a demon who likes huevos rancheros. Another complaint I have is about the character of Sawyer. I've only watched the first few episodes, but I am going to spoil you for them. So Amy meets Raquel, who's this really weird girl who's like a demon hunter. I would also compare the show to The Fades a little bit, but that's like my favorite show of all time, so any similarities just make me hate Crazyhead a lot more. So it starts out with the main character, Amy, thinking that she's crazy because she sees demons. She meets another girl, Raquel, who is like a demon hunter for a long time and tries to encourage her. When I heard about the show being the British Buffy, I thought they were teenagers, but I guess they're just kind of young adults, but I don't really know what they do or anything. Amy works at a bowling alley. I don't know how long she's been working there, but it's just sort of like the bowling alley is replacing high school, I guess, since all she does is like go there and see that creepy guy who's like, Amy, I'm so attracted to you. Please understand that like you should like me because I have a pure heart. Actual dialogue. So Raquel is trying to convince Amy that she should be a demon hunter. And this is, I feel like, when the show's coming off as really gay, because it's like Raquel is like so weird and awkward. She doesn't know how to relate to people, but like she really likes Amy, and she like, aside from wanting to be demon hunter, she just longs to be friends with her. And I feel like, if Raquel was just in love with Amy, I feel like that would just make the show so much better. Like, just commit to that instead of being like, oh, Raquel really wants to be really good friends with this girl that she just met. It's just really important to her for some reason. So there's all these bad demons, and then there's another demon named Sawyer, and Raquel's like, oh, he's a good demon, sort of, but she doesn't really like him, and they have these awkward interactions with each other. At this point, I thought they're exes, and I was really pleased. This was like the only thing the show had done that had impressed me, besides the fact that I just liked the main actresses, but I don't really think they're well served by any of this. So I thought it would be really cool to have a show where they already just like elided over the whole idea of somebody being a demon hunter who falls in love with a demon. Like, I like the idea that instead of making that the whole point of the show or making a big deal out of it, they would just say that it already happened and like it already ended, because being a young human demon hunter woman dating a demon is a bad idea, and just dealt with the aftermath. Immediately Raquel was like, he's my father. And so apparently Raquel's human dad was possessed by a demon. The show is very graphic, so Raquel says, the demon jizzed in my mom, and that's how I was born. So it means Raquel is like, special because she's half demon. But there's this whole thing about how the whole time that the demon was in her biological father's body when she was growing up, he like really loved her and saw her as his daughter, but because she had powers and she saw that he was a demon, she didn't like him. And so when the biological father died, he started possessing other people to try and like look out for his daughter, and Raquel always kind of pushed him away, but then in the end she has to accept that he really cares about her. I'm sorry, but the show doesn't seem to acknowledge like that if you possess a guy and have sex with his wife, like, it's rape. Sorry for being like no fun, but I feel like the fact that the show tends to have such graphic sexual dialogue yet like didn't address this is kind of weird. Anyway, sorry to be no fun, but I just really am not enjoying the show. I guess I haven't really talked about the genre elements very much, but like they're not very interesting. What would I compare it to that I actually like? Being human. The Fades, maybe not so much, just kind of the way it starts out with somebody thinking that they're crazy and then finding out their powers are real, which I recognize is kind of a common trope. Buffy, of course. Well, I'll watch it a little bit more and see if I like it, but I think only 6 episodes were made, and it's one of those shows where people are going to be like, oh, it was brilliant but canceled. And I'm like, but it really wasn't, though.